Well, hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your host, James Avramenko, and this week we're taking a deeper look at two of my favorite topics. First of all, we're going to be looking at the first tools, the first steps in dialectical behavior therapy. And then I'm going to try and answer one of the biggest questions I'm always getting asked and asking myself: how do adults make friends? It's going to be a blast, so for now, lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy this solo episode here on Friendless. Let me start off by first saying happy Thanksgiving to all my Canadian listeners. I'm recording on Thanksgiving Monday, and it is rainy and dark outside here in Vancouver. There's this great literary term. They call it a pathetic fallacy, and it's where what a character is feeling is reflected in like the weather or the surroundings, and it's often a very contrived trope in literature. You know, oh, I'm gloomy, so it's dark, or whatever it is. But honestly, right now Vancouver feels like a pathetic fallacy. Happy Thanksgiving, y'all. On the topic of gratitude or being thankful for something, though, something I'm really thankful for is that I am finally off the wait list that I've been on for about the last 4 or 5 months, and have just started a dialectical behavior therapy group, like a group therapy thing. I had my very first session last week, and it's every week for the next 26 weeks. I meet and we discuss DBT skills and enact them and practice them together. And I'm really excited. The first session was amazing. One thing that they say, obviously, like, I'm not going to be using names. I'm not going to be giving any kind of details of any sort. But one thing they do encourage is for you to talk about the skills that you learn in the session. So, you know, DBT is something that I have studied, relatively seriously for the last, year or two. But I've never had a chance to actually practice it in a group setting like this. You know, it's always been solo research, just reading books and, doing the workbook myself, these kinds of things. And so I'm really, really excited about it, but also it's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. My therapist, my boy Scott, and we were talking the other day about the difference that happens when people do sort of too much research without actually doing the therapy element of this kind of mental health journey. And I know I've at times gotten really stuck in that, where I get really hung up on, clinical terms or definitions or diagnoses or whatever it might be. And I don't end up actually embodying and practicing the techniques behind the theory. And that's very much what this group is all about. It's about taking the theory and putting it into practice. Because, it's all fine and good if you can define these terms, if you understand the markers of this diagnosis or whatever it is. But if you're not actually embodying this practice, then in a lot of ways, in my experience, especially when you look at things like the conversation online, the influence of social media, I find you could inadvertently be doing more harm than good. One thought I continue to chase and try really hard to embody in my own practice, and hope that in turn sort of, I guess, maybe influences other people, is that, everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own shit to deal with. And I find that when we go through periods of trauma, we end up looking for who to blame outside of ourselves, and we don't always turn inward. We don't always look at, how did I show up? Because quite frankly, obviously, there's a lot of situations where, you weren't responsible for what happened, but you were still responsible for being there. You were still responsible for how you showed up in those situations. You were still responsible for, did you continue showing up in those, whatever it might be, right? And so I think it's really important for us to always look inward when we reflect on these situations. And that is kind of the baseline of DBT. Before we go any further, though, just like a ultra crash course into what exactly DBT is. So DBT stands for dialectical behavior therapy. It was developed in the 1980s by psychologist Marcia Linehan, who was basically, she believed that standard cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, was insufficient for treating chronic behaviors, mostly stemming from, borderline personality, things like that, around self-harm, suicidal behavior, these kinds of things. She's also somebody who has the lived experience of having been diagnosed with BPD herself. So this whole modality was built to be, I guess you could call it kind of tactile, to be implemented, to be actionable, to not just be kind of sterile and considered philosophically, but to be actively practiced in your day-to-day life. So DBT is obviously incredibly helpful for people with BPD or other, chronic conditions like that, but also is really helpful for kind of anyone who's dealing with reoccurring behavior patterns that they're trying to actively change. So when you start the training, there are these 7 assumptions that they give you, and sort of like you consider these as the baseline for the whole program. And the reason they call them assumptions is because they're a belief that can't be proven, but we agree to abide by them anyway. So the assumptions in this group are: 1, people are doing the best they can. All people at any given point in time, they're doing the best they can. 2 is that people want to improve. So, the common characteristic of all people is that they would like to improve their lives and be happy. 3 is that people need to do better, try harder, and be more motivated to change. Now, that does come with a little asterisk that says trying harder and being more motivated may not be needed if progress is steady and at a realistic rate of improvement. But we still have to recognize the fact that people, while they are doing the best they can and want to do better, it doesn't mean that these things are enough to solve the problem that you're facing. 4, and this is a big one, people may not have caused all their own problems, but they have to solve them anyway. You have to change their own behavioral responses and alter the environment that you're in order to change your life. It's like that saying, your mental health isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. Number 5 is new behavior has to be learned in all relevant contexts. So new behavior skills, they have to be practiced in the situations where the skills are needed and not just situations where the skills are first learned. This is another thing. You have to embody it. You have to enact it. So the whole point of the group is that you learn in safety when you are regulated and you can practice, but you also have to use the tools in the moments where you need them, when you're escalated, when you're triggered, whatever word you decide to use, and when you are in those conflict moments, you have to use your tools. 6, all behaviors, be they actions, thoughts, emotions, are caused. There is always a cause or set of causes for our actions, thoughts, and emotions, even if we don't always know what that cause is. We talked a lot about this, and I've talked a lot about this in the past. Sometimes it feels like an emotion or a thought or whatever, it comes out of nowhere. Sometimes you feel something, you don't know what, but emotions don't just appear, right? They have a root somewhere. There is a cause somewhere, and it's about discovering what that root is. And lastly, and I love this one, figuring out and changing the causes of behavior work better than judging and blaming. Judging and blame, they are easier. But if we want to create change in the world, we have to change the chain of events that cause unwanted behaviors and events. Again, it's up to us. It's our responsibility. Things will happen that are out of our control. Obviously, that's what life is. That's what being alive is. That doesn't mean we have to continue to show up in those situations the same way we always have. Now, the remainder of the intro goes into a deeper analysis of biosocial theory and the sort of environment that comes with sort of needing DBT, things like that. I'm not going to get super deep into that because I want to jump into the first skill that is explored, because not only is it an incredibly useful tool for whether you're looking for DBT tips or whether you're just looking to just kind of improve your own personal mindset. But it also dovetails right into the bigger topic I want to talk about this week about, making adult friends and stuff like that. And that is the first step within the mindfulness unit. I should have said there's 4 units within DBT. There's mindfulness skills, interpersonal skills, emotional regulation skills, and distress tolerance skills. I am in the mindfulness unit right now, and the first step within that is what they call wise mind. You may have also heard of it referred to as the middle path. Essentially, it's the idea of threading the needle between the reason and the emotion and finding the balance between the two. Mindfulness is one of those words that gets thrown around so much these days that I feel like in a lot of ways it's kind of lost any intention behind it. And at the same time, too, I can't help but feel like it is one of the most fundamental practices that we could be working on for ourselves. I think a big problem is that, you hear a word like that and I think there's a certain type of person who expounds on mindfulness online, and I think it comes with a lot of baggage. And I think it also can come with a little bit of intimidation. I think when people hear mindfulness, they think they have to be like actively practicing meditation every day, 20 minutes in a Zen garden, or else they're doing it wrong, right? And the reality is that mindfulness breaks down into 3 really, really simple thoughts behind it. It's intentionally living with awareness in the present moment without judging or rejecting the moment and without attaching to the moment. So it's literally about getting out of automatic routines, behaviors, participating presently in our lives, noticing, consequences, discerning where you have control and where you don't, letting go of avoidance, suppression, blocking, and then attending to the experience of the moment rather than clinging to past or grabbing for future. And the reality is that you can be mindful at any time of the day. It's not, mindfulness isn't only done when you sit down to meditate or when you turn on your mindfulness app or whatever it is. Mindfulness is literally just being present in where you are in the moment. And, obviously it's so much easier said than done, but that's where the practice comes in, right? And so as you intentionally decide to focus on the moment and release the past and release the future, you begin to get better at living presently. The most baseline mindfulness practice is literally just intentionally paying attention to the moment without judging it or holding on to it, because that's all that there is. So, you're just literally sitting on your couch saying, I am sitting on my couch. I have my microphone in my hand. I'm speaking into the microphone. I'm not letting my thoughts go to where I was 10 years ago, where I might be 10 years from now. I'm not thinking about that stupid thing I said in junior high or what job I might want in the future or whatever it is. I'm just sitting with myself presently in my living room, looking out my window and being with myself right now. If you want a little pep talk, the 3 goals as outlined in my worksheets of mindfulness, the reason we want to do it is because it will reduce suffering and increase happiness. It'll increase control of your mind, and it will allow you to experience reality as it is. And I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty fucking good to me. So that leads us to the first tool, as I mentioned, in the arsenal of mindfulness, which is wise mind. The way they kind of overview it is picture 2 circles kind of overlapping with each other. On one side, you have reasonable mind, and on the other side, you have emotion mind. And in the overlap, in the center of that, is your wise mind. It's the middle path. It's the state of mind that considers both reason and emotion, but doesn't allow one or the other to control, and instead is considering both. Hence, dialectics, right? So in your emotions side, you could consider them, hot. They're mood dependent. They're emotion focused. Often when you're in emotion mind, you're ruled by your moods, your feelings, the urges to do or say things. Often facts, reason, logic just go right out the window when you're stuck in emotion brain. On the other side, you've got reasonable mind, which is often characterized as cool, rational, task-focused. Often you're kind of sort of ruled by facts, reason, logic, and quote unquote pragmatics. Values and feelings are usually not considered when you're really stuck in reason brain. And what wise mind does is it essentially characterizes the wisdom that you hold within yourself. It allows you to see the value of both reason and emotion, and it brings both sides of your brain into unity so that you can consider the wisest choice possible. Often when we're in one side or the other, I talked about this in another episode, every emotion, if it's left unchecked, is dysregulating, right? And that includes on the other side. I'm even trying to be cognizant of my language because lack of emotion or being trapped in that like logic brain is just as quote unquote dysregulated because it's just as inconsiderate of your other side. So rather than just letting your freak flag fly and reacting way too instinctually, or the other way of just being way too cold and calculated, you're tapping into your wisest choice so that you're considering the present moment and you are behaving according to that. Now, there's lots of different techniques you can practice for trying to get yourself into wise mind state. One of the things they highlight right at the start is it's really important that you practice these skills when you don't need them or in environments where you don't need them. Because if it's easier for you to practice them, then they're going to become much more automatic within you so that when you are in situations where you do need them, they're going to be able to be tapped into that much easier. So one of the techniques that we tried in class was a visualization. There's lots of different kind of audio-guided visualization practices you can find on YouTube. Imagining you're a stone flake on the lake, or you're walking down spiral stairs within your core. These are good if you have time to sit with yourself. I like to practice more active ones because I find when I get into dysregulated situations, it's usually because I'm with people and I don't always have time in a conversation to say, hey, listen, I'm going to take 5 minutes to visualize the spiral stair inside my core. So the one I have been working on this week has been, as you inhale, you breathe in the word wise and you breathe out the word mind. And you allow yourself to just regulate to the flow of your breath. Another one is to pause and ask your wise mind a question. So as you breathe in, you ask the wise mind a question. And as you breathe out, you listen for the answer. But you try not to give yourself the answer. You're not telling yourself the answer. You're listening for it. And that's how you get out of your instincts. That gets you out of being too locked into old habits. But instead, you sit with it and you let the answer truly come to you. There's a bunch of different techniques that are kind of variations on each other. Asking, is this action or thought or plan, would this be considered wise mind, before you act? So much of this is about just slowing yourself down, attending to your breath, and letting yourself center into yourself, right? Settle into your center, expand that awareness of the moment. One I really like is dropping into the pauses between inhales and exhales. So as you become more aware of your breath and you breathe in, you hold yourself into that pause. And as you breathe out, you notice the pause just at the top and the bottom of the breath. And you can sort of feel yourself kind of fall for a little moment within those little pauses. And they're really gentle and they're really soothing. And if you just allow yourself to enjoy that, that's going to bring you right into the moment. Now, that's literally as far as we got in the first session, so I'm not going to go any further than that. But I feel like this is a really fun primer. I came out of my session just so excited and so like so jazzed up to just try this new technique, and I was so excited to share it. And I really encourage you to give it a shot. It can be as simple as just noticing your breath, or if you're feeling yourself dysregulate, look around your room and say out loud one thing you notice. There's these techniques of 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, on and on. But if you don't have time for something like that, just say out loud one thing you're looking at. I'm looking at my water bottle right now. And just always remembering to be gentle and just soft with yourself. It's not, be gentle, you fucking idiot, right? It's just be gentle. It's okay. Everything's okay. The session also expanded my thoughts that I've been having around language. Something that Scott and I work a lot on is this idea of like calling things good or bad, or judging emotions, or saying these are hard, or whatever it is. And instead, what the instructors recommend using is effective or ineffective. It's a really benign, neutral statement. It's not a judgmental statement. It's just, this is effective for me. This is ineffective for me. And it's a way to just remove that internal narrative of good versus bad, because those don't exist. There's no good, bad emotion. There's no good, bad thought. It's just, is this effective or is this ineffective? And the way you judge that is by getting clear on what it is you want, who it is you are, who it is you want to be, who you expect yourself to be in the world, and then deciding, is this behavior going to be effective to continue that trajectory, or is it going to be ineffective? If I start screaming at this person, is it going to be effective for me to consider myself a good person in society? So I just really like clocking language. I think, it's the writer in me, obviously, but I think it's really important that we become much more, mindful of the language that we use, especially internally. Because when we start saying, oh, I felt good, or yeah, it was bad today, or I had a bad day, or whatever it is, you didn't have a bad day. You had some hard moments, but it's not like nobody has like a bad day all day, every day, for all week, for all month, or whatever it is, So getting really cognizant of the internal narrative that you're telling yourself about yourself is very much a first step into getting towards a deeper mindfulness and deeper presence into your day. Woo! So Psychology Corner is wrapped for the week. I wanted to pivot to, this question has been asked a few times, and I always kind of duck it because it's so big, and it's something that I don't have an actual answer for. But it is this question of, how do adults make friends? I keep reading across the board how, we're currently considered the loneliest generation. People 40 and under have never been more isolated, have never been more separate from each other. And obviously the pandemic played a massive part in that, but those numbers were already trending that way beforehand. The way technology has advanced, the way we communicate with each other, the way we socialize with each other, these problems, these separations and divisions, were already there. They just got kind of exacerbated. You know what I'm trying to say. It made them worse. And that is just kind of the new factors, like since people have been growing up, ever since we were babies and then grew up, people have been struggling. There's schedules, there's social circle dynamics, there's work and family and everything else that comes into play that pulls us away from each other. It sometimes feels, it oftentimes feels like every year that passes, I am in communication with fewer and fewer people. Now, I might be considered a outlier in that I, have been pretty mindful about paring down my circle, at least of close friends. But in terms of making new connections, that's something I have struggled with, basically my entire adult life. And lately I've been kind of like, for lack of a way of putting it, researching, like, how do you make new connections? How do you get out there? How do you meet people? I live in Vancouver, which is stereotypically known as a pretty no new friends type city, and that's very much been my experience. Often there's like very established groups, and it's next to impossible to break in, which is fine. That's cool. Hell yeah. Stay friends with the people you knew in high school. That's not psychotic, but it's really hard to kind of crack that nut. And so what I've done, I've come up with a couple of the things that I've been trying to do in the last couple months. This is by no means a complete answer to the question, nor is it like going to work for everybody. But this is the stuff that I sat down with, kind of reflected on, and decided were going to be the parts of my life that I addressed in order to try and build new connections for myself. The first thing for me really was addressing my personal mindset, asking myself, like, what kind of new friends do I want? What kind of new connections do I want? I think when for me, when I start getting these worries, or when I start getting these ideas in my head, they're really big and they start being too generic. I want friends. Well, what the fuck does that mean, right? So instead, I kind of tried to sort of narrow it down of like, what types of connections do I want? Do I want casual? Do I want, emotional? Do I want like fun party, whatever it might be? And I got really clear about the types of connections that I was trying to build for myself. A pitfall that I have found myself falling into a lot is this sort of like internal, quiet, unspoken, almost resentment of not being invited to things, or not being communicated with, not being reached out to as much as I'd like. And I've realized that, I've said it in previous episodes, it's this idea of like, I've decided I'm going to actively be the friend that I want others to be to me. So that is about taking responsibility for my actions and putting in effort on my side. So if I want people to, invite me out to things, I find things to do and I invite people out. There's a couple venues in town that I really love to go to, so I have like alerts set for when new events at those spaces are happening, and I buy a spare ticket and things like that. So I plan ahead, and I try to be the one to put the effort in to building connections that I'm trying to foster. There's this saying that I don't know where I picked it up, but I think in university somewhere, but I always like to say sin bravely. So it's this idea of like, if you want things to change, you have to be the one to actively do it. So you've got to be brave in these scenarios. Just the other day, my friend Gavin and I, we went to this speed dating event. And also, like, I'll say, like, social events are fantastic opportunities for connections, but you do have to be active in them. You can't just kind of barfly and hope that you're going to be the main character who gets spotlighted. Like, main character syndrome is a disease, and you have to be the person who's actually going out. I keep on repeating myself on that point, but it's so fucking important. But coming back to this dating event, as we were getting there, we were getting really anxious because both of us had never done anything like this before. We'd never done speed dating. It was at this big space. It was, all these things. And what we started doing is just breaking down the next step. And this is something I find in like big social environments, if you have any kind of social anxiety, is doubling back to the mindfulness thing, is just taking it one step at a time. So instead of being like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Who's going to be there? Was there going to be this? What's going to be that? Da, da, da. And then suddenly you're spun out. Instead, it was like, okay, we're going from Gav's to the venue. So let's just do that. And then once we got to the venue, it was just, okay, let's just get through the tickets. Let's get into the space. And then, okay, we're here. Now let's just get a drink, right? Just keep yourself really present and go to one step at a time. Don't get far ahead of yourself. Other sort of choices for like how to, I guess, like find people is, use technology. Leverage the technology at your hand. Search for groups, clubs, pastimes, book clubs, birding events. Think of stuff that you've always wanted to do, and then Google it. Trust me, if you live in a city, especially, there are other people who are doing that. I've gone to board game nights. I've gone to poetry readings. I've gone to book clubs. I've joined a couple of writing circles and then dropped out of them. But it's about decide what you're interested in, and then find those groups, and then make yourself go to them, because it's really fucking scary. And you're being so brave by doing it. And people are out here trying to make connections. And so like when people make these kinds of groups and make these kinds of events, they're not setting them up so that they can then like carry you, I mean, like CARRIE, like they're not going to drop any pig's blood on you, like these are events for people to meet each other. So trust that everyone else is probably just as, if not more, anxious than you are. So don't trick yourself into thinking you're the only one who's worried. And instead, try to trick yourself into being the one who's most confident. I always teach my students about this idea of confidence isn't inherent. It's practiced. It's learned. And so nobody can read your mind. Nobody knows you're uncomfortable. Nobody knows you're anxious if you don't outright say it. Instead, straighten your posture, keep your chin up, shoulders back, chest out, and just pretend you're confident. And the weird thing about our nervous system is if we pretend we're confident, our body starts to believe we are, and then we start actually acting that way. So it's one of those like fake it till you make it. If you're, trying to find places to find these kinds of groups or find these kinds of events, if you're old, Facebook is great. I put this question out online, and a bunch of people said Meetup, the app, is really good. I haven't tried that one, but I would say give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. And then just Google, whatever the hobby is, plus your city, and you will find stuff. The other side of the equation is once you've found this thing and you're going to it, now how the fuck do you act like a human in front of these people? And obviously that is going to be a much longer conversation with yourself than one quick little podcast is going to be able to solve. But here's a couple like little conversational tips, actually pulled out of the DBT pantheon. So a couple things is the first thing you want to do is be mindful of your conversation. So ask questions as much as you are responding to them. This is a big one, ironically. Don't be afraid of small talk. This is something that I have been pushing for. I'm not somebody who readily chit-chats. I tend to instinctively go pretty like, what I've always thought is like, I go deep because I'm contemplative. But really, that's kind of a form of trauma dumping, I think. Even if you're like not talking about a personal experience, if you're just like, yeah, fuck all the basic shit, let's talk about what you think the meaning of life is. Like, that's kind of dehumanizing in a way to sort of ignore just like figuring out if this person's safe to talk to or not, and allowing them to figure out if you're safe to talk to or not, Countless times in my past, I've gotten into these like really deep esoteric conversations with strangers and then never spoken to them again because, I think we jumped over the kind of bricklaying, the foundational elements of the conversation. I think small talk is actually a really important factor in building connections. So don't be afraid of just like complaining about the weather or talking about your pets or, whatever it is people talk about. And that leads into the idea of self-disclosure. Be really mindful of that. Another one of my past behaviors has been to, jump in and really like let people know everything about me really quickly. And that isn't the way I go about it anymore when I meet people. I think self-disclosure is it's actually a protective measure, is being really skillful and really mindful of what you tell to whom. Anyway, and so one of the ways they recommend doing it is be observant of what the other person is disclosing. Right now, that doesn't mean my ADHD brain will jump to like if you're not familiar, ADHD, neurodivergent. Often one of the communication forms is instead of asking questions, they'll hear a story and they'll sort of match the story. And in sort of like neurotypical perspective, that apparently is seen as kind of rude. I think they're nuts, but if you sort of observe the types of topics that the person is demonstrating they're comfortable talking about, then follow that lead a little bit and build on it, Actually, that leads right into this other point of that I think is like, how do I put it? Basically, directly attacking ADHD people, which is don't interrupt, which is something that I do all the time. I think I'm getting better at it. I don't know, listeners, you probably are able to tell if I'm getting better at it or not. But be really cognizant of what you're gonna say. So rather than just sort of like jumping in and just kind of like freeballing it and frantically just like blurting something out, be listen and hear what the person is saying. Don't listen in preparation of what to say, but listen to their whole point and then ruminate. There's apparently, I mean, I've never been, but I've been told that the stereotype of the sort of snooty French person, which is probably a really archaic, outdated stereotype at this point, but it comes from a misinterpretation of the fact that culturally they'll pause before responding because they want to be sure that they give a thoughtful answer in return. So, be a little more French about it and take a beat, breathe, do a little wise mind practice. Consider, would this be a wise mind choice to say? And the last point in this section that I really like is learn things to talk about. It's, I have abolished the term guilty pleasure from my lexicon. I believe if something gives you pleasure, there is no guilt involved in that. Unless it's like, causing harm to people or something like that, in which case, different conversation. But if you really like Survivor, or you really like Danielle Steele books, or if you collect action figures, or if you only listen to K-pop, I don't know, whatever, you really like trains, that's a good one. If it's something that makes you happy and you know a lot about it, talk about it. Why not? One of my favorite things to do is to listen to someone talk passionately about something they know about. That was actually one of the most fun elements of that speed dating event, was that it was a chance to be interested in people. It was a chance to hear, like, what are they going to choose to say? We only had a minute each to talk. It was 2-minute dates. And so it was what are they going to decide to talk about? How are they going to enter in, and the topics were so varied. I met people who were dietitians, people who were super into birds, people who were biologists, an insectologist, and it's so interesting to hear people talk about things that they're interested in. And in turn, it's about finding the confidence to speak about things that you know a lot about. Erase that shame. Get rid of that, they'll judge me if they think this or that, because quite frankly, if you're into something and you're passionate about it and you talk about it and that person in front of you judges you for it, they're not going to be your friend. So that's a good sign. Quit trying to convince people to like you. Instead, take that as a sign. Oh, okay, you are a lovable person for someone else, but not for me. And that is the other key factor, is you don't have to like everyone and you don't have to be liked by everyone. So quit trying to convince people who don't like you why they should. It's their loss. Those are all the notes that I have. And really, I feel like we're only really scratching the surface of this. So I think I'm going to continue talking about it in later episodes. But I think it's important, like the example I gave about going to that dating event is take things step by step. Don't get ahead of yourself. Practice the initial things and just build incrementally. Don't be in a rush. That's a big element of my whole process these days, is slowing the fuck down. There's lots that I want to do, and there's all this social pressure of I'm getting older and this and that and the other thing and time and life and carpe die's fucking nuts and all this shit. But it really, I'm going to use a fun word, behooves us to slow down and just enjoy what's happening in the moment, and to use that time to practice new things slowly so that it really gets into our system, really gets into our instincts and kind of overwrites our old programming or something like that. So we're going to cap things off there, but I hope that gives you some really helpful intro pointers to first to the world of DBT and second to the world of making friends. It really comes down to, I think, believing that you are worthy of making new connections. That's something that I have really tried to embody within myself and within how I am trying to show up in the world. It's an effective technique for me, is to remind myself that I am worthy and I am worth being seen, being liked, and having connections. And God damn it, Sweet Pea, you are too. But that is going to do it for me this week. Thank you so much for listening through. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to tell some of your stories inspired by some of the things we talked about today, please write to me. You can reach me friendlesspod@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok @friendlesspod. I would love to hear from you. As always, if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. Share the links with all your friends. Tell people about the show. Every little bit counts, and it is always greatly appreciated on my end. And don't forget to sign up for the Substack. I am getting back in the groove of things. New post coming this week. It's a ton of fun, and all the other stuff coming down the pipeline I'm really excited about. So sign up for that in the show notes and enjoy. But that's going to be it for me. So let's just wrap things up here. I will be back next week with another brand new episode, and I hope to catch you there. But I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then. And this is now. So for now, I'll just say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweeties.